We can start, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, good afternoon once again. So, in this session, we'll be looking into civil engineering with nature's design. So, I am Dr. Ruby Freya, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, SVCE. So, it's a pleasure to speak on this topic that connects creativity, science, and sustainability. So, civil engineering with nature's design. So, civil engineering at its core is actually about creating safe, functional, and sustainable structures. So, from bridges and buildings to dams and highways. So, we are all basically civil engineers. So, we know that there are different domains in civil engineering. So, but if we think about it, nature has been mastering these same principles for millions of years. So, for example, like honeycomb structure built by bees, it uses some minimal material to create a very strong structure, so which has a very maximum strength and stiffness. So the same thing can be applied for a lightweight structured grid system in our structural engineering, right? So same way, there are a lot of things that we can learn from nature and um, implement it in civil engineering in all domains. So nature is the greatest engineer, greatest teacher in all these cases, where we can find solutions for many of the challenges that we face in everyday's life. So nature becomes an inspiration for these sustainable and efficient structures. And we'll be seeing the basic topic is on nature's design principles. So we are going to learn how nature is designing its own environment, and from there, what can we learn and how much we can implement in civil engineering. So it is basically bridging biology and engineering, or to know about flora, fauna, and then use it in our infrastructure engineering. And this topic, it is, once we know, it is towards smarter, greener, and resilient infrastructure. So in this presentation, we'll be also exploring how the nature's blueprints will guide us, okay, how it is going to guide us toward the future of civil engineering, where innovation meets sustainability, and every structure can stand in harmony with the environment. As we talk about sustainable development goals, its targets, we have to reach this target in by 2030 or 2040. So all that can be implemented using these principles. So first we'll be seeing what is biomimicry. So basically, this nature's design principle means biomimicry. So biomimicry is a practice that we learn from and imitate or mimic the strategies found in nature to solve human challenges. So we have to learn from nature how the nature would behave, uh, right? And a very simple example that I've given here is the lotus leaf. I'm sure all of us would have realized that water droplets don't stick on to the leaves are just repellent to water. It just slips away the water. We might be thinking it has some kind of, like kids, when I ask the kids, they say that it could be due to polished surface or something like that. But the real fact is that it has microscopic bumps. There are so many numerous bumps on that surface. It is not actually smooth as we think. It does not have a waxy layer as we generally think. It has a lot of microscopic bumps. So what happens is, I'll be showing you picture of this again. So whenever water falls or whenever the dust sticks onto these bumps, we know that whenever you have so many undulations, so it is prone that the dust and dirt will stick onto these the surfaces. But when water falls on that, it will just slide away the dust with it, along the bumps and it rolls away. So the lotus leaf, if you really see, it is always super clean, right? And this strategy or this microscopic bumps, when we learn in depth about that lotus leaf, we can use it in our human related issues, like there is for fabrics, whether you want it to be, no dirt fabric, you can create such, you can imitate or mimic that structure. And there's a company called Lotus and Paints, which initially started, and now there are many paints where they have this technology. So on the wall, these bumps are created by which that the dust doesn't stick onto it. And few other examples for learning from nature. We all know how the ants walk, go about, right? In a very orderly fashion with no traffic jam. All these are going to should have inspired us always, but we should also think into solving some engineering problems day-to-day lives. Similarly, if you see the color dyes, uh, so there are so many beautiful beetles and bugs which have very beautiful colors. All that is, natural and biodegradable substance. So we have to find the strategy how that color is created, and the same can be used in our real time problem. So for example, now when you see makeup items like lipsticks, eyelashes and all that, everything has artificial colors, dyes, and some plastics are added on onto it. And those are very very microplastics, and plastics in whatever size it is going to disturb our environment, create pollution. So when you wash away your makeup or something, these microplastics will just go into the drain. It finally pollutes the soil, the sea water and everything. But when we try to find a solution using natural dyes, biodegradable materials, this can be eliminated. So that is how we have to go about this. um, see that, the scientific name, you can know, and you can know generally what is the size of the trees and where it is grown, and how the leaflets are, how it is, uh, how are they are arranged, the structural outside, how it looks. That is learning about the neem tree. Now, when you see on the right hand side, I've given the points what you learn from the nature. So, what you learn from the nature is that if you have leaf, humidifies the air around it, and so that it brings in precipitation and it brings rain. Okay. And how does the leaf cover, how does the canopy of the tree bring rains? Okay, then you have leaves. These leaves also capture solar energy, so they do it without any toxic materials. Similar to these leaves, any leaf is going to, green leaf is going to collect the solar energy. People are using this technology to create the solar cells. Like one of the inspiration to create the solar photovoltaic cells is from the butterfly wing. So similarly, from here also, we have to know what are the different things happening in a neem leaf, and wherever it is applicable, we have to use this strategy. And also, if you see the branches, it gives you a very strong structural support and with very minimal material. You can see a vast number of branches getting distributed, right? And also the trunk moves the water without motor driven pumps. We know that most of the trees, we here, because I'm specifically talking about neem tree, I'm telling this point, but otherwise we know that uh, from the roots the water is getting absorbed from the soil, and through capillary action it takes, it goes up to the topmost part of the tree. So all these mechanisms we can learn, in the same way we can use. Right? So what we saw just now was a term called biomimicry. There are few other terms which are similar to this, so that we'll see one by one. So if you see, this is biophilia. Biophilia or biophilic design, this is basically bio-inspired methodology. That is, you are, and philia means liking. So you love the nature, and because you love the nature, you want a waterfall inside your house or outside the house for landscaping, or you want to plant trees in your balconies, you want to have indoor plants, you want to have plants on the desk, right? So it just shows you how much you love the nature. It is not a biomimicry method. Okay. So that we have to know. So this is about biophilia. We just want to connect to the nature, and we do that by adopting such methodologies like planting some trees, indoor trees or outdoor, indoor plants. The next terminology is biomorphism. In biomorphism, we are trying to imitate just the outside structure, the entire structure, not the strategy. It just looks like a nature. Okay, if you take the picture on the right, which is the Lotus Temple. So it's a meditation hall in Delhi where the outside structure is like lotus. Just the form from outside, it resembles a lotus flower. And so this is also a bio-inspired methodology, but it is not exactly biomimicry. So then the other picture that you see is a stadium which resembles a bird's nest, and still it is not biomimicry. Okay? So we are just trying to look into what is biomimicry in depth. So we have seen what is biophilia. It is just liking the nature. Biomorphism is just to copy the form from outside, like the pine cone, something like that. You want to create a different structure, you can do that. The third term, which is again not biomimicry exactly, this term is the bioutilization. Here we are going to use the material what is available in nature for some purpose. Directly you use that thing. Basically simply using the timber from any tree or the bamboos directly, because it has more flexibility and stiffness. We are going to use, this is bioutilization. And on the right, the first picture is a bamboo structure. On in the left bottom, we have this is the from the agro waste, you're creating bricks, lightweight bricks that are created from the agricultural waste. And on the right bottom, we have something called the living roots itself. We try to form as bridges. You can it is being used as a live bridge itself. This is in eastern part of India, in the Seven Sisters. You have this example, and we also try to use the algae or bacteria for self-healing concrete, right? So all these we're using that something that is available in nature directly for the structural, for civil engineering use, and then that is bioutilization. Again, coming back, now what is biomimicry? So biomimicry is a practice that learns from and mimics the strategies found in nature to solve human challenges. So we have some human challenges, some problems are there, we find a solution through nature itself, right? So now this example, this is about a woodpecker. So the bird is a woodpecker, and what they have created based on the strategy used by woodpecker is the uh, shock absorbers. So you can we know that woodpecker keeps pricking on the wood very fast. So the way the head is created, that is uh, the skull, the beak, how strong it is, and how it doesn't get affected by the impact or the shock. So that is being used in shock absorbers. So the skull is like the aluminum layer or the outside that is used, which will help in safeguarding what is inside the shock absorber. And the solid springy bony support near the tongue, that is like the that is used to create a elastic layer in the shock absorbers. And the beak also again is very extremely strong and does not bend or fracture at all. Based on this, steel like material enclosure is used, so which is very strong, right? And so generally a woodpecker will uh, drum on the tree as fast as 22 beats a second. So in certain places it also has spongy bones that is also being used, like in the springs, right? It can give you some flexibility, but still, and it's helpful in absorbing the shocks. And next one, this is okay, the bird is kingfisher. Shinkansen's head, or this bird. Okay, so basically in 1989 the Japanese bullet train was already very fast, uh, but these bullet trains had a very noise. So when it went out or went into tunnels, basically, so in normal case it was not an issue, but when the tunnels, it was too much of noise pollution which disturbed the people, the towns and the cities. So what the designer did was, he analyzed this kingfisher, this bird, when it actually dives into the water. This picture is from a snapshot from a very ultra fast video. So you can see when the beak is going in, you can't see a splash of water, not any noise came into picture. So the front of the train was after that model to copy this beak, so that the train can be quieter, faster, and also uses less fuel. So with the long, sharp nose, it was like the bird's beak. It went into the water, two different media, from air and to water. Here again, while going inside the tunnel, you have different air pressures, and still this solution was possible. So this is one example for biomimicry. Another example for biomimicry is from gecko's feet, like the lizard's feet. So here in this case, if you see, they, geckos or lizards climb up the walls and even, float like across ceilings. They can stick onto the glass without any glue or suction. So again, you can see some kind of vacuum kind of stickers, and there is something called gecko tape itself. But basically here again, when you closely watch, it has a very, very small tiny hairs called setae. So these structures are created by using microfibers, very, very tiny hair-like structure. And so, this same adhesive adhesiveness is possible. So one more example, like I said, is for the lotus leaf. So you can see this magnified picture. It has very small, tiny bumps, and it will roll the dust also along with it. Okay, and you have paints based on that. And this is again a beautiful example. The Velcro that we use most of the. So this is from a kind of a seed, this burdock burs. Here, this engineer, he observed how these seeds get clung to the clothes, or even if an insect sticks, how it just sticks onto it. So this hook and loop mechanism was developed from this. So it is easy for us to remove and put on the Velcro, and it is based on this biomimicry. So why do we go for biomimicry? So we can develop new products, processes, and systems. We can improve the existing systems. We can discover new solutions to difficult problems. We have socio-economic and ecological pleasure. And we have the best teacher, like I said, the best teacher, best engineer, who has 3.8 billion years of experience. So it is very easy to do transformative innovation, in which which will transform the way we live itself. So this is the main topic I would like to cover on, is the nature's unifying patterns. So for every issue, every problem, every challenge that we face, the nature itself is following some patterns, some design principles, and we have to learn from that, basically, right? So the first one, if you see, these are the 10 lessons that are to be considered every time you design anything. So the first one is, nature uses only the energy it needs and relies on freely available energy. So energy is an expensive resource for all organisms, whatever energy, right? So the risk of using excess energy is death or the failure to reproduce. So that's why we go for this non-renewable, non-renewable source of energy. We learn about all that. So therefore, the nature uses it sparingly, tailoring their needs to the limited amount of energy available. So when no energy is free, so nature source of energy are freely available because they are renewable. They can be found locally, and they don't have to be mined, right? So water, air, solar, so all these can be used. So all these freely available energy is only used by the plants for photosynthesis, right? For the air currents, winds, everything is based on all this naturally available energies. So the two major energy expenditures for organisms are obtaining the energy, like through photosynthesis, or finding and capturing food, and then growing the materials that make up their bodies and their homes. Okay. Next, second one is, so from the first point, we have to also learn that instead of going using fuels, how we can go about this renewable energies. Next is, nature recycles all materials. In nature, if you see, one organism's waste or decomposing body becomes a source of food and materials for the other organisms. So you can say this as recycling or upcycling, which is happening in nature by itself. Nowadays we are trying to use some plastics, and then we have to grade it as a recyclable and all that. In nature, as such, whatever complex organic materials or molecules it is, it automatically gets decomposed into smaller molecules, and in some other form it is being useful for another organism or something. So there's always a cycle, and the cycle doesn't get disturbed on its own by the nature. The third point is nature is resilient to disturbances. So for example, like it's just like a ball. You bounce a ball on the wall and it comes back to you, right? So whenever there is some kind of natural disasters also, like some forest fires or floods or any drought, it again finds a way for self-renewal and self-repair. So even if there is excessive flood and all the crops have been damaged, so once the flood is over, it finds its own ways that some other birds or by wind, the seeds will again come onto the ground, and it will, the plantation will again grow. So that is nature is resilient to disturbances. The fourth point is nature optimizes rather than maximum. No harmful side effects at all, whatever happens. Fifth one is the nature rewards cooperation or mutual help. Or like there are few insects. Okay, that's an insect. I forgot the name. So it picks the nuts from the trees very fast, and nutmeg. Sorry, it's a nutmeg. The creature name is nutmeg. So it tries to pluck a lot of nuts very quickly. It eats very slowly. So it eat, like for example, it eats one nut. 3 of the nuts are being stored under the soil for later use. And these nuts are, finally, if it is not being eaten, that will create another plantation. So somehow the nature finds its ways for mutual benefit. Or we have this parasitic plants, so it helps each other, and somehow the ecosystem is maintained. And then nature runs on information. So sometimes the organisms and ecosystems need to receive information from the environment, and they act appropriately to the response to that information. So there are some kind of sending and receiving signals from other organisms or within their own bodies, and they use it for a broad range of purposes. Seventh is nature uses chemistry and materials that are safe for living beings. So like I said, for the bead dyes, or for example, even silkworm, the silkworm and the spider, it has a sticky fluid that comes out, by which it is creating the silk, or it is making the spider web, and it no way it is toxic. Okay, so it is all non-toxic and biodegradable also. Point number 8 is nature builds using abundant resources, incorporating rare resources only sparingly. So for example, that are eighth and ninth point, nature is locally attuned and responsive. It's like the point that we have to take into is, when I'm building a house in Chennai, I shouldn't be using Rajasthan marbles, Italian marbles. Okay, so whatever is available locally, that has to be used. And finally, the nature uses shape to determine functionality. The way you know how for simplest example we all know is about coniferous trees. So the trees are very tall and like a cone, and usually these trees are in snowy places so that the snow will just slide and fall off, right? So in different locations you have different types of trees. So all these are that nature uses shape to determine its own functionality. So these unifying patterns mean these are the design principles that nature is using, and we have to learn from this, and we have to try to implement them that for whatever we are designing. You design a dam or a structure, or you want to design a runway in the airport. We have to learn from the nature and use it. Okay. So few examples in civil engineering, all the domains. Biomimicry in structural engineering. So honeycomb pattern. What is the strategy used here? The bees build honeycombs using hexagonal cells. Okay. And these are usually tightly packed with minimal material and maximum strength. So this hexagon is actually stable under compression and provides an efficient structure for storing its honey and supporting the hive. So same thing in engineering, how we are applying it in the slabs, panels, bridge decks for high strength to weight ratio. So you can see these honeycomb geometry in concrete slabs, and you can create thin walled hexagonal cores like in sandwich panels, wall panels, similar to beehive. So this will save material and also maintain rigidity. So this is also being used in aerospace, honeycomb panels, precast floor slabs, and then pedestrian bridge decks also. The second example in structural engineering, we could use it in tree branching. This often we would have seen. So what is a nature's strategy? So when I say nature's strategy, how nature is following it, and then how we are going to implement it. So the nature strategy is like the tree branches distribute the loads from the canopies from the top down through the trunk and the roots. It optimizes the strength, it optimizes the flexibility and the resource transport. So we see that different trees have different types of branch systems. So it follows different patterns so that it can use minimum material to support heavy weight. So in engineering, in structural engineering, we can see, you can use it in the truss bridges or roof structures. We can actually mimic the same kind of load paths. So we talk about the load paths, that load is going from the slab to the beam, beam to the column, like that, right? So that can be done efficiently through this. A few examples also include the Mumbai airport. Most of the airport structures you can see tree type branching. So if we saw what is called biomorphism, right? So if you just want to have a tree-shaped column just for the aesthetic view, then that is biomorphism. But when you want to actually carry the load specifically using this tree-like structure, then that is biomimicry. Okay. So spider webs combine radial and spiral silk threads to manage this tension and catch prey. So you can see in most of the cable stayed bridges, tensegrity structures, or roof structures, with thin sheeting. All this will use this kind of stress paths. So parametric design tools simulate web-like layouts for efficient load transfer, and also you can see resilience in bridges, these facades. So most of the stadiums you can see these kind of cables. And the fourth one is human bone structure, where bones are like, it is the most densest, where, outside it will have a very high strength, and inside you have this marrow kind of spongy layer also. right? So again, strength to weight ratio is taken care of. Same way, these topology optimization can be done if you use kind of bone structures. There are few buildings where our backbone, a spine-like structure is being created. And also now as 3D printing is, into the trending, 3D printed structures can be used in this form to bring out the same mechanism. And the fifth one is about the bird's wings. So birds have hollow and very stiff bones, flexible joints. It has a very good aerodynamic efficiency also. So that can be used in the roof structures. So these are few examples for honeycombing, as in the entire structure, or only for in the bricks to create panels. And the middle picture is about the trees. It can give you the aesthetic appearance, as well as if there is really heavy load, that arch effect can be brought in. And on the right hand side, we can see something like the spider web. So in radial direction and transverse direction, these wire kind of thing goes in. And the last right picture is basically a museum based on this bird's wing. So also in other branches of civil engineering, we could be using this, as in the construction management. We can use this ants coordinate complex construction, right, through very simple local rules, decentralized decision making. Okay. And they have some kind of communication through pheromones. So that is the strategy used in ants. So similar to that, in the project management, we talk about CPM bird, the activity from where to where, how it goes, all that, right? So some local decisions have to be taken. This in the schedule, it shouldn't get delayed. All these can be learned from this ant colonization. Similarly, beehive efficiency. Again, that is beehives are created, very rapidly, very effective, efficient construction, and it can also be easily expanded also. So this will help in the modular construction or prefabricated construction planning. Okay. And termite mounds. So that is basically termite mounds. If you see, it is termites generally, you can find it in hot places, but the termite mounds, the place where they live, is in a very inside it will be a very cool place. So the climatic control of the building can be built according to this strategy. So climate responsive project scheduling considers natural cooling cycles, passive ventilation lessons from these termite mounds, and this can be effectively used. And I have a picture also for this. Uh, right, so this again comes in the environment also. So if you see this, the picture on the left is the Eastgate Center, which is a building in Harare, Zimbabwe. So that area in Zimbabwe is very hot, and the architect had to build the building with less number of air conditioners, and it has to be cool. That was their want, and based on that, he learned the strategy from the termite mounds, and then he created about this passive cooling, and he has done it. So that the architect is Mick Pierce, who has used this principle. So the building uses natural ventilation, thermal mass, and chimneys to regulate the temperature. So it has, uh, you know, it has kind of intricate tunnel systems wherein this natural ventilation is possible, air rotation is possible and done. Some more examples is neural networks in the brain. how the brain works. Similar to that, this AI driven project optimization and scheduling is possible. And the leaves veins transport system, we can see different kinds of vein systems in the leaves, and how it spreads nutrients efficiently. So similarly, material logistics or supply chain system, all this can be learned from the leaf veins. How biomimicry can be applied in geotechnical and soil engineering. So we have root systems where you have long branching roots, and in some plants you might have smaller roots. So based on where it is located, whether it is, you have a lot of groundwater, it can just have enough short roots. And sometimes when it is hard to find the water, the roots grow very long and deep inside. And still, if you see the root systems, it just catches stabilizes the soil. And it we have learned basically in EVS, right, that if you plant more trees, soil erosion is prevented. So these um, all these ground improvement techniques are basically learned from these root structures. And then the earthworms. Earthworms generally burrow, mix, and then they aerate the soil, creating macropores, and then they facilitate water flow. So they are always farmers, friends. So similarly, in engineering application, the tunneling machines and the soil improvement treatments mimic this worm burrowing for efficient excavation and improved soil drainage. And also, these tunnel boring machines often use segmented cutting tools inspired by this worm movement. And sand dwelling plants, for example, the grasses and other plants which bind the sand, slow wind, and then they trap the sediment and prevent erosion. So, also, this bioengineering erosion control mats, strategic vegetation planting, all these are the you know highlighted from these uh, biomimicry from nature. Again, like these earthworms, we have few more burrowing animals like moles, crabs, rabbits, so which also helps in the design of underground utility networks, retaining walls, and basically how to burrow, the geometry of that tunnel that is being created, and not, and also to prevent the collapse, and also optimize the access, how to get into it. How this biomimicry could help in water resource engineering. So lotus leaves, like we saw, it has this very small groups which can repel water and which can be self-cleaning. Simply like that, we can have these kind of self-cleaning canal linings, right? So which can be hydrophobic. It is easy for improving the water flow, right? And also it can be used in concrete linings for the urban water channels. And the cactus pines, if you see, I have again another slide picture showing these cactus pine. The ends of that cacti leaves, like the thorns, it collects the morning fog and dew actually. And then it channels the water droplets down the spines. So the fog harvesting towers, unlike this rainwater harvesting, we could also harvest the droplets from fog. And there are spiny mesh panels that collect this water from air, and then it is being used. So this is being used in Chile and Morocco. These mangrove roots we have seen, very dense. So in Pichavaram, you have mangrove forests. Many of us would have seen those roots. So it again, the dense roots provide filter sediment. It slows down the water and provides coastal protection, basically. So you can, whenever we are talking about flood barriers, we can create these kind of artificial mangrove barriers also, which can trap in the and help in the shoreline defense. Then there are these beaver dams. Beavers usually pile logs and muds to form dams that slow streams, retain water, and create habitats. So same thing can be used in the watershed restoration projects. And river meandering patterns, you can see, right? They just curve, they flow down, they dissipate the energy, they reduce the erosion by itself. So this floodplain and channel restoration using meandering designs for resilient urban river engineering is being learned from this. And the same has been used in the restoration of the River Thames in London. And few examples from environmental engineering. So, like we saw the termite mounds that has been used in Eastgate Center for naturally ventilated buildings. And then the wetlands, if you see, they purify water through gradual sedimentation, microbridge soils, and plant root filtration. So we have to make sure that these constructed wetlands treat the wastewater in cities and industry using planted beds and engineered flow paths to mimic this natural cleansing functions. And reefs, if you see, they dissipate wave energy, and they also create this very rich marine habitats. So similar kind of artificial reef blocks have been created to restore the ecosystem in Australia, US, and Southeast Asia also. The leaves and photosynthesis, we know that it absorbs sunlight and it transforms this lights to energy. Same way, this building skins with solar panels and integrated energy for air purifying facades using catalytic surfaces. It draws directly from the leaf strategy. And forest canopies, we have this tropical area, equatorial area. It just regulates temperature, traps moisture, and supports biodiversity in different ways. So same thing can be used to create green roofs or shaded walkways where you can manage this microclimate, a localized climate restoration. And again, another domain in civil engineering is remote sensing and smart infrastructure. So here we have something called the bat echolation, through which these bats emits high frequency sounds and interprets echoes to map their environment precisely in darkness, right? So it travels at night and it is based on these echoes. So same thing has been used in ultrasonic and lidar sensors. So in the drones and robots, we can use it wherever required, and we usually use it for distance measurement. So similarly, it can be used for various applications. Then we have this spider vibration system, which is inspired by the spiders detecting, even minute vibrations in their webs, because it carefully walks into it. Only the preys, the insects stick onto the spider webs, and the spiders are very careful. So structural health monitoring uses these kind of sensors. Then the human nervous system, again, a network of very fast and adaptive sensors. Similarly, smart infrastructure means a very good nervous systems for the cities, right? There should be a proper brain to it, a control, and there should be a many sensors like in our nervous systems. So that can be used in the intelligent system. And like we saw the bat's sound capability, same way for the bee vision. Bees detect ultraviolet and multispectral patterns, helping them navigate and identify flowers. So this is some kind of thing that can be used in the drones, satellites, and remote sensing applications. And the bird navigation also, they also sense some kind of magnetic fields. So that is how they go for this migration across continents. In proper seasons and everything. So same way, advanced satellite positioning and terrain relative navigation technologies can be used for the flight navigation methods and so on. Now, we have seen a lot of examples of how these biomimicry is done, how it can be applied in civil engineering. And you might be thinking that all these are already implemented. What else is there? So there are so many things when which are not being used. So for any, I mean, like, first of all, we need to know what the problem is. We have to realize what challenge is there, and then we have to look into nature for that solution. So it is not that every biomimicry is, completely researched. It is a very ongoing process. So there are so many research going on this biomimicry applications in, say, geomats or in different domains of civil engineering. So now this, what I'm going to talk about, the biomimicry process is how you go about this process. So first thing is like define. So first thing is you identify a problem, what you want to solve, what is the challenge that you want to solve. It's like, the problem identification, or even if it is a project for the student or any research work that you want to start with, you identify the problem. You define what is required, what like the objective of an experiment. You find what is the function and what you want it to be done. That is defined. And then you biologize the challenge. You try to find out what exactly you want as a solution, a rough idea. That would be the biologize step. Next is the discovering the biological models and abstract strategies. That is, you're trying to find how in nature such kind of problems are being analyzed, how it is being solved. That is to be analyzed. And then that has to be implemented. Emulate the strategies means you imitate it, mimic it in our structure. So finally, you evaluate the fitness, whether the thing that we have created, whether the design that we have created is going to be effective, whether you can get feedbacks or you can put it into test runs and see whether it works or not. So this is the biomimicry process. A simple example, like I said, for that East Gate, Harare, Zimbabwe. So the architect had a problem. So he defined the problem that he has to reduce the number of air conditions, but still he has to have a very cool climate, cool environment inside the building. Then he's found these termite mounds. So which is the biological structure, he's going to look into it. Then he saw what is the strategy that's happening inside it. What is the biological model that is used in the termite mounds, like so many internal tunnel-like structures. Then he saw how that can be used into his building. Okay, and that is emulating the strategies. And finally, you put it into test run and do it. So similarly, we saw an example of a cactus spine also. So we have to understand what is the function of the cactus spines or the leaves, thorn-like leaves. What is the function? How it is doing it, that is the strategy or the mechanism. So understanding that is important. Another thing is, when you do biomimicry, there are 3 different types of mimicking. That is the form. Okay, the first picture, it is like the blue whale fins, right? The tail have and the entire surface has a lot of bumps, which stops the turbulence. These structure of this blue whales, it is being used in the windmills. It is being imitated in the windmills. So this is imitating the shape, structure, and physics of the structure, right? The second one is the process. For example, the spider or the silkworm, how it is creating a chemical, and how this chemical is made into some kind of a solid, right? The spider web or the thread. So how this liquid thing kind of becomes solid. So the process, how it happens, the same thing you want to imitate, then that is mimicking the process. Third is the system, the entire ecosystem. So for example, there are grasslands, so there is worms which helps the farmers, which helps the plants, and the cows are also grazing there, and still the cow's dung will be a manure for natural fertilizer. So it creates an ecosystem. So similarly, we could do something like we have a industry, and the byproducts of the industry is being used for something else in the nearby system. So the entire system we are going to imitate or mimic. So I said we can have to create, think of some problem statements. So usually there are two different types how you can approach to biomimicry. One is from nature to solution. From nature to solution means you are just looking into nature, you're observing the nature, and you suddenly feel the example shown here itself. I'll just tell you. So you just see that wow, the lotus leaf, no, doesn't, the water doesn't stick on the lotus leaf at all. It is so repellent, how beautiful. You just see that, you admire it, and then you are interested to know about it. You read the science behind it, how it happens and all that, and then the idea will spark, saying that from this, oh, this is so nice, I can use it for something like this, and you get some idea. That is from nature to solution. The second approach is the problem to solution. So the bullet train was created, it was put into use, there was a lot of noise pollution, they wanted to find a solution to the problem. So there was a problem first. So how to solve that problem? For that solution, when you look into it, then we have come across this kingfisher, which dives into water with no splash, no sound, and that was used to solve this problem. So these are the approaches. And sometimes to solve these problems also, to identify the problem. So I said, for problem to solution, you have to identify a problem. Sometimes everyday problem, we have something and then we want to find a solution for it. And nowadays, this global warming, everything is, the most climate change is the most trending, highlighting thing. And we are all aware of sustainable development goals. There are 17 goals, and there are under each of these 17 goals, there are few targets given to each of the nation. So each country has to fulfill that target so that the entire world is going to become sustainable. And under these targets, so for example, now in no poverty, there are 2 or 3 targets that by 2030 we have to reach, we have to reduce poverty by 30%, something like that. We will have targets. We will also have something called indicators. Indicators is number of people under the poverty line in 2015, number of people under poverty line in 2030. So number of people, that is the indicator. How you measure that, to know that you're achieving the target. So these targets, the entire world has a target. Each of the nation has a target, and the nation is giving the targets to the states. So the state governments also implement some targets. So we are all responsible, all human, and that is why we try to implement these SDGs in our school curriculum, college curriculum also, so that everybody is aware of it and we contribute to these, to achieving these targets. So when you go through these SDGs very clearly, you can identify some kind of problem from this itself. So for example, if you take SDG number 3 is good health and well-being. It ensures healthy lives and promotes well-being for all at all ages. Okay. So there are few targets under that. So say like one of the target is substantially increase health financing and the recruitment, development, training and retention of health workforce in developing countries, especially in least developed countries and small island developing states. The indicator is health worker density and distribution. So you go through all the goals, indicators and targets, and then you could choose one problem. So again, coming back to this, okay, you choose a problem and we try to find what is the problem that I wish to address. So that is the define. Okay, how can I increase the decrease the infections that are caused in hospitals? Because during the COVID, like we think that hospitals are safe and we go there, and even though we don't have that infection, we get it from the other people that are in the hospital. So even if you go to the hospital, how to make sure you don't get infection from that place, right? So some kind of problem you identify, you define that. When I say biologize, then you have to find how does that nature accomplish same kind of thing. So how, you know, how the pathogens or any infection doesn't happen in some kind of plants, how does it have immunity? To ask these kind of questions is going to be biologized. And then discover is what organism or which system, which flora fauna or where similar kind of function that I want to address is happening, which insect does it or which plant does it. We have to discover the actual organism. And in the abstract, how do I translate this biological strategy to a design strategy? So biological strategy means that the chosen organism, how that is achieving the target, and how am I going to do it in my design. Problem that I wish to address. Okay, so how the strategy I'm going to do it, how is it feasible, or how can I manufacture it, or how can I create it? All these are the emulate step. And then when you do evaluation, how can my solution be applied in the real world? How can I follow the nature's design principles, those 10 principles that we learned, and how will it be useful for others? So that has to be evaluated. That is the evaluate session. And then there's one more thing that we have to talk about is the function and the strategy. So like I said, a simple example is if you take spectacles, or take in the case of a lotus leaf, like I said, we have to identify what is the function. The function of the lotus leaf is like to stay clean. What is the strategy being used? The lotus leaf contains microscopic bumps. Okay, so that will reduce the contact area between water and the leaf, which will actually prevent the water from adhering to the leaf. Now this will make the leaf hydrophobic, that is water repellent. So the water will roll off the leaf and carries the dirt particles also with it. Okay. So what is the context? Context means like for in a project we have just a minute. Yeah, sorry, just a minute. So we have this, like, context is like the scope of a project, where all it can be applied, in which condition it can be applied. So the lotus leaf will be effective only when there is water, because water is going to roll off the dirt. So when you use this lotus mechanism for the paints, only for the exterior paints it is going to be useful, or otherwise with water, if you try to clean, and then that is going to be useful. So it is important for us to learn from the nature and then use. So in conclusion, so as we have seen throughout this presentation, so nature is not only just, a source of beauty, something that we admire. It is also a very big master engineer, right? It offers a lot of time-tested solutions for strength, efficiency, and for different adaptations across different contexts. So we need to observe things, and we need to implement in our life, in our designs. And basically those 10 design principles that are very important, so that we live along with the nature without disturbing the nature, and making the world, more sustainable. So biomimicry will encourage us to look beyond the conventional solutions. We can innovate, and we can also partner with the nature, basically, right? So let us continue to observe, question, and learn from nature, so that every new challenge becomes an opportunity for environmentally sound innovation. And every project that we do, that we give our students, will bring closer harmony, closer to harmony between the built and natural world. And these are my references. And basically the third one is an NPTEL course on biomimicry. Thank you. So if you have any questions, you can. Is any questions? Yeah, hope at least it would have given you some kind of points to take home, and to think of some project topics that we could do a research on, or we could give to our students. So I hope it will be useful in some way. So thank you all. Yeah, sorry, I'll just share the attendance link. Yeah, the attendance link is being shared, the chat box.